Good evening, everyone. I'm John Henry. I'm the director of the FIA. It's nice to see you brave people out here. It's going to be a special evening for you to have such an intimate moment with our visiting artist. We're opening an exhibition tonight titled Brush with Reality, featuring the work of Yigal Ozeri. To celebrate tonight's opening, we've arranged a special conversation between the artist, his gallery dealer, and the FIA curator. But before we begin, I'd like to recognize the lenders to the exhibition and express our sincere appreciation. This exhibition would not have been possible without their generous loans. I'd like to recognize the Arno Art Museum, Eileen S. Kaminsky, Louis K. and Susan P. Mizell, Doran Seabug, the Schiffman family, Mark and Livia Strauss, Ari and Molly Strauss, Henny Westbrook, Wayne Yakes, and Mika Ziprakowski. I also want to thank the Charles Stewart Mart Foundation for their continued support, which means so much to our success. And I especially want to thank the citizens of Genesee County for demonstrating their support of our programs by means of the Genesee County Arts Education and Cultural Enrichment Millage, which, by the way, also provides free entry to the FIA for all Genesee County citizens. And of course, a big thank you to Huntington Bank for sponsoring the Huntington Free Saturdays, which allows everyone beyond our county borders free admission to the galleries on Saturdays. Tonight's conversation will offer insight into Yigal Ozeri's career, focusing on the past decade of his work, along with recent works created during the pandemic. Yigal has shown extensively around the world, including solo exhibitions in Spain, China, the Netherlands, France, Germany, and Mexico. And he is represented in New York by Louis K. Mizell Gallery in New York City. Lou Mizell first coined the term photorealism in 1969. Since 1967, he has organized hundreds of exhibitions which have traveled with accompanying catalogs to major universities and museums around the world. Tracy Glab is the FIA curator of collections and exhibitions and has been here since 2009. In addition to curating the exhibition, she wrote the essay, A Journey to Realism, for the Brush with Reality catalog. So now, please welcome our guest, Yigal Ozeri, Lou Mizell, gallery dealer, and Tracy Glab, curator of the FIA.
So we're going to start this discussion tonight with Lou Mizell. As you heard John say, he coined the term photorealism, so he has a lot of insight onto that whole movement. So we're going to start with your take on photorealism.
Okay, good evening. You're going to see tonight what I consider to be a very unique and rare exhibition. When I continue discussing this, you'll understand it, but primarily, Yigal is a photorealist, the type of artist I've been representing for the last 50 some odd years. And one of the problems with the photorealists is that they can work 8 to 10 hours a day year-round to produce 1, 2, or 3 paintings a year. And if I have an artist that gives me 3 paintings a year for 10 years, I have to sell them so that they can live on it. And when a museum decides that they would like to show the work, they can't afford to bring 30 paintings back from all over the country and all over the world. Yigal is unique in that he can produce more than 3 paintings a year, and that's the basis of what I'm going to try to explain to you. But before I do that, I'm going to give you the history of photorealism, which ends up with what Yigal is doing. So we go back to the middle of the 1800s, and the camera was invented. Prior to that, going back to the caveman, recording the hunt in a cave. Artists reported and recorded faces, places, and things, portraits, still life, and landscape, all through history. Now we get to the 1860s, 70s, and this is a joke, but you'll understand what I'm saying. Cezanne and Renoir and Manet and Monet are sitting around in a tavern in Paris having a bottle of wine, and one of them says, "Hey, there's cameras here. We don't have to do that anymore." Meaning they didn't have to do what artists were doing all through history in reporting and in the realism and whatever. And there were many, many talented artists doing great realist works. And even some caveman drawings were pretty good. At any rate, they began what we call the Impressionist period, went to the Post-Impressionists, went on to Picasso, Leger, and Braque, went into Surrealism. Things started happening because the camera was doing what artists used to do and supposedly didn't have to do anymore. Okay, so now we get up, and this can be a very long discussion, but we'll jump to abstract expressionism, where artists have now eliminated imagery completely. And I grew up with the abstract expressionists. I met them all in 1956 through 59. By 1960, 61, I was working for Rothko and Stamos and Franz Klein for a short period. They didn't like Rivers, Rauschenberg, and Johns very much, who started bringing imagery back. And then came the pop artists. And there was Warhol and Lichtenstein and Wesselman and Ramos, who I, again, worked with. I actually represented Stamos until he died many years later, abstract, and then Ramos, pop artist. But they brought back realism, and in the 60s, there were about 100 artists, notable, that were painting realism. Again, we called them the New Realists. They included Philip Perlstein, Tillem, Bruder, Al Leslie, etc. One of the problems was that in the 60s, there was no place that any artist could go to learn to paint realism, which is what all the academies did up until the beginning of the 20th century. So there was no place. Every one of them had to learn on their own, invent and learn the technique and the methods. Towards the end of the 60s, I began to see a few artists who were making the most precise realism that had been done since the Luminists and the Hudson River School. The main difference between them and every other realist in the last century was they didn't deny that they were using the camera. Because the camera was illegal, it was cheating. All of the great artists that we know that painted realism and even other things through the century did use it. Here we have artists saying, we use the camera. It's a tool to gather information. But at that time, Richard Estes, who you all know, had a camera with a roll of Kodachrome or Ektachrome, which was 24 or 36 pictures, and believe it or not, that was expensive for him to use. So while he made some pretty incredible paintings, and I've shown his work for 50 years, and all of the original photorealists, you look at it, and it comes nothing near to what I'll call a digital age photorealist and explain in a few moments. So anyway, in 1969, by accident, I was showing a few of these artists in my gallery on Madison Avenue, which was pretty small, and a critic came in and said, these are terrific. He says, the art world's going to hate it, but it's terrific. They're going to tell you you're going backwards, and et cetera. What do you call them? And I made a point that, well, they're using the camera, the photograph, and photographic. What about photorealism? And the following weekend, he wrote, Mizell is showing photorealism. In 1970, the Whitney Museum's first show was a show called 22 Realists. Jim Monty was the curator. 7 of the artists who are now photorealists were in the show. In our discussions, I mentioned it. He used the word in the Whitney catalog. And that's the beginning of the word photorealism. There were essentially 13 artists back then. Okay, now we're going to get back to the problem of no place to learn how to paint realism. So we go to Charlie Bell. I think we have a slide of Charlie Bell there. Charlie Bell was the still life painter of photorealism, and his paintings were, he started painting tin toys, then he went to pinball machines and gumball machines and marbles, but the scale and the imagery had never even been conceived of by artists before. That painting there, the marbles are about 2 feet across, 3 feet across. His paintings were 10 times to 30 times life size. And when Charlie Bell gave a lecture, he would say, I can tell you what I do in 2 hours. I can show you what I do in 2 weeks. And I can teach you to do what I do in 2 years. Probably 30 artists came to spend 2 weeks to see what he does. And maybe 6 of them became apprentices and spent 2 years. Okay, now this is a precedent of an artist, the photorealist, teaching what he does, because none of the others did it, none of the others had the time to do it, and as good as they were, they didn't. And then we get to Yigal Ozeri. So now we get to the point about why are we seeing a show now that has only happened for Bechtel, Estes, Close, and Audrey Flack, which means a retrospective with this many paintings as a one-person show in a museum. Because Yigal runs his studio as the old masters ran their studio. He finds young artists who would like to be or are painting realism. He says, I will employ you to work in my studio with me. I will give you time and days and an easel to work on. I will teach you how to do what I do. And in his studio, he has people stretching canvases, priming them, background coat, and actually working on a painting side by side with him. Now, you're going to see incredible detail in his paintings, but because his paintings are based on photography, the background and the foreground are blurred. All of that part is really easy to do. While he's painting a face with every eyelash and every piece of hair, and where the detail requires great detail, he has other people that can paint on the other 30, 40, 50% of the painting, which means that in a year he can have 30 paintings, which means that I can introduce his work to 30 more people, which means that he can be included in more shows and in more museums and more collections. He is not a Jeff Koons or a Damien Hirst that have a factory with 100 artists making what they tell him to do. Damien Hirst has dot paintings. He did 6 of them, but there are 1,300 out there. So I want to make it very clear that there's a very big difference between what Yigal Ozeri does to come up with what he does. I have heard over the years, well, that's cheating. Again, cheating because he doesn't spend 8 to 10 hours all year round to make 3 paintings. It's not. It's brilliant. So that's basically what I'm telling you, is that you won't see a photorealist show like this because there can't be enough work. I have done 300 shows. They've been all over the world, but they are group shows, and many of you were privileged to see one of them happen here 3 years ago.
So
And with that,
yeah.
I turn it over to Tracy.
Thank you. So speaking of that show called From Lens to Eye to Hand, Photorealism from 1969 to today, that was the introduction to Flint, of Yigal Ozeri to Flint. So a lot of people ask me, and it's probably the #1 reporter question when I get asked in an interview, is why is this in Flint? Why here? And so this is the answer. We did this exhibition that Lou organized in 2018 as part of our celebration of our new contemporary craft wing. And it was a very popular show. And there, right there, is work that you will also see in the Hodge galleries when you go into there tonight. But that was the introduction of Yigal to the Flint audience. And that painting received more comments than any other painting in the exhibition, I can tell you. And you can kind of see why, and this is no diss on any of the other painters, but it's just that the way he can portray people is fascinating, and no one believed it wasn't a photograph, and we kept telling you, no, it's a painting, it's a painting. So, Yigal, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sharing your work with us. And we're going to just jump into what got you started. I mean, what was your influence? Why did you become a realist? We're going to put one of your favorite paintings on the screen.
Yes, before I start to talk about Velázquez painting, the Las Meninas, I want first to thank to Tracy and John Henry, that I tell you that you people that live here in Detroit, in Flint, you blessed with an amazing museum. This is a museum in a level that all the 10 big museums in the world. It's a great collection, and it's a great, great space that you can see art, and you should be very proud. The other end is Louis, that Louis's phenomena is for so many years pushing the photorealism. And you know, most of the galleries today in the world, I said it again and again, the galleries in the world, what is interesting for them is to sell art and to push artists, but what we care is about money. Louis push photorealism is the only gallery that push an idea and push content and push an artist all the way and take care of them from day one until they die. And this is not exist anymore. That's not exist. Now, to the painting. When I was I born in Israel, and the first time that I left Israel, I went, you know, in Israel, I was belong to the generation of reproduction. We're looking on the books that everything was in black and white. We didn't have any classical painting in any museum in Israel, no a portraiture. My teacher said, you know what, you don't have to paint a portrait. You can glue a collage and you can be okay with that. Do a still life. So it's very funny. So I came one time, and this is a very interesting story. I came to the Prado, and I sit in front of Les Meninas. Les Meninas, from my point of view and the point of many, many artists, included Picasso. Picasso done 65 versions of that piece, and this piece changed the art world. And I remember I come to the Prado, and I stayed in front of that. I didn't realize that I was 3 hours, and the guard in the museum called to the police. He said, this guy is sitting there for 3 hours. What he's doing in front of the painting? He called to people and said, what are you doing in front of it? I said, this is my favorite painting. It's the first time that I see it. I saw it in black and white, and they were laughing. I said, I'm just an artist. So the Les Meninas is the beginning of modernism. I tell you why. If you can look on the way Velázquez paint in an idea that called on a prima. On a prima, it's a things from the professional way of painter know that is painting. Take the brush, paint fast. Think about the time, 1650, 100. He paint very fast, like an abstraction, and he paint on a prima. When it's not dry, he paint the next layer and the next layer and the next layer. And this is never exists before, and you can see it on the dress that this is not like a classical painting. If she come close more, you can see the touch and everything. And this is a revolution. And another thing, what's happening in that painting, that's the painting that the artist paint is auto-portrait. In every place, in the back, there's an auto-portrait of Velázquez, the painter that paint. You don't see it, it's dark, and all the painting all around is auto-portrait. So it's fascinating. It's an idea of how artists involve in a realism, in just changing the idea of camera and photograph himself and do all of that together. So it's a fascinating painting that influenced many, many artists. And what I want, when I was sitting in front of that painting, I said to myself, until that time, I was afraid to paint a portrait. And then I said to myself, how I could tell to my children that I'm an artist if I don't paint a portrait. Portrait is the highest hierarchy in the art world. If you don't paint a portrait, you don't consider yourself a painter. And to paint a portrait, you need a lot of responsibility. And it took me many years until I start. Today I'm 63, 40, when I was 40, 42, I started to do the first portrait of my children.
So other old masters have influenced you, especially
Yes.
in the realm of detail.
Yes. So if you can see this piece in the right size belong to the collection of Wayne Yates. Is from Colorado. He is with us here. That's a painting of Lizzie Jagger, the daughter of Mick Jagger. I paint her a lot. But the unique in that way, and you can see Dürer. Albert Dürer is the German classical painter. He is the only artist in the history that didn't afraid to paint hair. because most of the artists, even included Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, the hair was very schematic, it's very abstract, it's very fast. They didn't pay attention. They pay attention about the portraiture, the skin tone, the eyes and everything. But he's the only master that worked on a hair. And it's very interesting about his work. I don't want to lecture to you too much, but it's interesting because important, I always said that artists has to educate people. And I want you to understand that this painting of him, he started in black and white. And what he need? He paint all the painting in black and white, and then he start in color. And this is unusual because they didn't know that. They find one painting in the Metropolitan Museum that you can see that he paint in a monotone color, and then he paint in color. This influenced me a lot, also about the idea how I paint with a tiny, it's a big painting with a tiny brush every hair. And I'm very well known on that particular things that could achieve that achievement in painting. In realism.
And you have to get really up close to this painting in the exhibition. You can because it's glazed, so that other times you might get yelled at. So another painter,
yes.
this time American.
Yes. And
20th century.
this is amazing artist called Andrew White. Of course, a lot of people know who is Andrew White. But I want to start with the story about Andrew White. I was, many years ago, I think 10 years ago, I went to a show in the Philadelphia Art Museum. It's a very important museum in Philadelphia. And it was thousands I was walking, I had to wait in line. It was thousands of people. And I was shocked because I didn't know that he's so well known. And I started to ask the people, I walk in line, I said, where do you come from? He said, from Arizona. Where do you come from? From Mexico. Where do you come from? From all around America, the people came to see that show. And people, I asked them, you collector of art? No, I love art, and we love this artist. And in the same week, there was an article in the New York Times, and they asked Robert Storr, he was the chief curator of the MoMA in New York, and they asked him, why you don't bring, because he refused to bring the show of Andrew White to the MoMA. He said, enough people saw it in Philadelphia, I don't want to bring it. And then he said, why? What is the reason? He said, I think Andrew White, look at the sentence that he said, I think Andrew White is esoteric painter. Is only his family and himself understand what he do. It's not important. It's not a subject matter that interesting people. And I'm sitting there and see thousands of people looking on his art. And this is what the curator in the MoMA said about a legendary artist, not only thing, the most important realistic in American art. So that's for you. He influenced me a lot about, if you can see the brush and I done it in Denver with Wayne Yates. He took me to the Red Rocks and I photographed like 4 girls, and you can see the parallel walks with when you can see the field here and the field there. It's amazing how we paint in tempera in a small brush. And when my assistant, I say that all the time, came to work with me first time, they told me, Yigal, I finished now School of Visual Art, I finished all the best schools. Why you tell me to work with 0 pen on a big canvas? It doesn't make sense. They didn't teach me. I don't know how to do that. I had to teach them. I said, yes, I want to show to the world that we can take a small brush and make it like the classical world, the whole big canvas. And that was the change. When I look on his painting and I realize, when he died, there's nobody that continued this genre. Nobody continued that idea. And in art, it's always, when I talk in art, it's like connection in history. Everybody connect to the other one. And they ask me sometime, a lot of my assistants, why we are good painter. Why they cannot look on us? I said, everyone has to be unique and continue what the other person start. Even little bit ahead, you're going to win. You're going to say something different.
And the next example is not only someone that influenced your style and attention to detail, but also a subject matter, and that's John Everett Millais.
Okay, that's a very, very interesting, again, an interesting story. John Millais from the Pre-Raphaelites, he done Ophelia, that's a famous painting that exists in the Tate Modern in London. I'm sure if people go there, you can see they leave this painting away. And I had a model that called Priscilla. She was a girl that I found living in a tree house in Maine, in a tree house. And when I come there, my friend told me, you know, you have to come and see it. I came and see it, and then in that moment, I said to myself, you know, what I'm running every day about money, about life, I go from place to place, and I see this group of people hugging the tree, kissing the earth, going in the water, growing a vegetable, and living in a tree house. There's not problem about time, no problem about day and night. And I took her after that, and this was my first model that I worked. She's not a model. She was like a real person that lived their life. I took her to Costa Rica, to the rainforest. And this painting, again, is belonged to Wayne Yates from Denver. And this piece called Priscilla in Ecstasy. So what's happened in that moment is that Mila, when he took his model, he took her to the outside, and it was a cold day. Then he brought her, she got pneumonia. Then he brought her, he had to continue the painting. He brought her to his bathroom, to its bathroom. He put her there, he took a lot of part of the tree and put it there and finished the painting. That was a phenomenal painting, how he done that. And this influenced a lot of artists. And I took her to Costa Rica, and she lay on the cold water in 5 degrees, and he was shaking. And you know, ecstasy, it's like a small death. It's like she come like white, and then she back to life, and then she stand up, and she was like shaking. We hug her, and it was a phenomenal moment to see that. And this I could not tell her play the Ophelia. She didn't know who is Ophelia. She living in a treehouse, and that she didn't know anything, but she know what is nature and how to love nature.
And you captured every bit of it.
It's incredible that she didn't know about this painting, because if you look at the two mouths,
She didn't know at all.
identical.
She didn't know at all.
It's really incredible.
Yeah.
So now we're going to turn a little bit to talk about the technique. I know Lou mentioned it a little bit, but we'd like to hear from you a little bit more about how you work.
So Lou said a lot of things about photorealism. But the photorealism in the 70s or in the 60s, when Lou started, they had to do a slide of 35 millimeter. That was the source to them. And Lou wrote like 4 different books about different period of time. The last period of time, he talked about photorealism in the digital age. So if you talk about the 70s, that people work from slide, and a slide of 35 millimeter, it's today every little boy has a camera with thousands of digital power, and everybody is an artist. They go in the street, they find things, and they do it. But again, camera and all these things is in the end, it's just tools. Is always depend what you do with that, the subject matter, and the idea how you do that. And every artist find a different way how to you know, people, I tell you something, people could identify everything, they could write about everything, but one thing they could not write about energy. And I talk about it all the time. When the mind of an artist, if you can take 7 or 8 artists and put them in a room, and everybody will paint the same things, the energy between the head to the heart to the hand will go differently. You cannot measure that. You can be the best doctor in the world. You cannot measure, not psychology, not how you cannot explain. People ask me, how you do that? It goes like that. Every artist creates something. I try it many times to explain. But in the end, I could come back to the 70s. The 70s, they done it with slides. They projected on the wall. They done grid. Many artists done grid. You know, grid. And then they take the photograph and they print the photograph, and they copy every piece of square into the painting. We don't work like that. I'm a photorealistic artist, yes, but I'm doing erasing to photograph. What is the mean? I'm going to the nature. I photograph the model. I come to the computer, and that's what Louis writes in his book. I go to the computer, and that's the digital age. That was all the revolution. I changed from the original point until the end, until I project it on the canvas and paint. There's many stages. I go through the computer, I change things, I move things, and then the first original become not anymore the first original. In the end, you'll see the drawing, you see the production, and then I put the photograph, and then I paint from the photograph part by part. Much more, my painting is more, you know, because I was an abstract painting in the past, it helped me. It helped me, and I have advanced about other artists. Why? Because I understand the two words. Because the photorealistic artists paint a lot of time when they see landscape. They paint, let's say, New York scene. They paint in the window, far away, exactly the same details that they could see the closest way. In my situation is different. The foreground is much more tight, and the background is much more abstract, like you can see in blurry. So that's the way, and I think because I was an abstract painter, it helped me to put the two words together. This is a painting of crystal, and we done. My daughter, Yigal Ozeri, the last couple years told me, Daddy, you know what? Why you all the time paint women in the nature? It's good and everything. Why you cannot go and start to paint? You are in New York for 35 years. Start to paint the New York scene. It's so much. It's like Picasso said, the best stuff. People looking so far away, but the best stuff is around you. Paint what you can.
We're going to get to that, so
Yeah.
don't give too much of that away.
Okay.
So you already talked about Priscilla and how you met her, and
Yeah.
she lived in the treehouse. So I'm going to jump to Shelley.
Yes.
So can you talk
So
a little bit
Shelley,
about Shelley?
it's a very interesting story. You can see it because you don't have the piece here on the screen. Shelley was when I met her, she was a young woman that here is a piece here that belonged to Lyndon Nelson here from Detroit. That's she was in the army. She was in the army, and she was belong, and that's very fascinating because it's very relevant to 2 weeks ago, because a lot of you for sure read this article. There was an article in the New York Times about the Israeli first special unit that killed the special scientists in Iran. Somebody read that article? It was a major article. So that's a unit in Israel that's sitting in Tel Aviv in the computer, believe it or not.
Part of the Mossad.
Part of them. This girl was the head of this group 3 years ago. Last year, they designed a special robot that somehow they get it into the border, and they done it exactly when the scientists leave his job every time, because these scientists built the atomic bombs in Iran, and he want to change, and that's what Israel was scared, and also America was scared because they done it together, that he want to build on a missiles, atomic on the top of the missile. How you call it?
Just the fact that she was the one that stopped it.
Yes.
She is very important. Continue with the art.
But
We're not into international wars.
This is good things, and to have a woman to be on the top of 30 men, it's very unusual, no matter what, in our society. And I think they ask me many times, why you paint women?
Wait. When I met her, by the way, knowing that she was Mossad and all this, I said, I bet you don't have any trouble getting secrets, which is what we see in the James Bond movies. But go ahead.
Yes, and I think she the beauty in that show, that you can see her like a girl that becoming a woman and want to be a beautiful. And I'm not shy. I always said, they asked me, what do you paint? I said, I dealing with beauty. They said, yes, with the word that everybody talk about Black Lives Matter, about Trump, about crazy here, crazy there, Biden, all of this crazy element in our life, what we really have a lot, racism, everything. I don't shy to paint beauty, because the beauty is the essence of life, and I want that people could enjoy it. You know, painting want people to come and enjoy it. and have fun. We have so much hard life. When people come to painting, you need to enjoy it. And I'm not shy that I paint beauty.
So now we are going to talk about the New York story, and you already mentioned Sheer, so I'm going to embarrass her a little bit and say that I personally want to thank her. She was such an important person in
Yes.
organizing this exhibition with the Flint Institute of Arts. She was just an angel. I don't know how else to describe her, and so you should give her a raise.
Yes,
So-
absolutely. She has raised. What do you mean? She take all my money, but it's
Okay.
not. I
Well,
don't.
then that's all right.
She managing the account.
She did an amazing job, and I'm glad you brought her up because she really was your inspiration behind
Yes.
the New York story. So,
And I want to say something about her. You know, we are from different generation, and she come and she connect with all the young generation. And you know, when artist is eligible to have person like her, is connect you for the young generation. We have Liz also in the gallery that Louis has, and I have Sheer. So the idea is that a lot of time we're stubborn. We want to do that, we want to do that, and we don't want to listen to other stuff. And people like them coming, like Sheer, she changed the energy, and she come and she also photograph with me, and she involved with the decision. And it's interesting. It's interesting. It's different way of thinking, and it's fresh. It's fresh, and that's what I'm happy. I'm so happy that I have person like her.
yes, you're very lucky, very lucky. So let's look at some other images from the New York story.
Okay,
and
so
tell us
that's
a little bit
an
about it.
image. That's an image that belonged to the collection of Gary Shakeman. He's a big developer here in Detroit. Everybody know. It's a very unique piece, I have to tell you. That's the most biggest reaction I ever got on any piece of art in my life. And it's again, it's Sheer photograph that one moment. You know, we walking all the time in our life. And many times we see something and say, I wish I have a camera. I didn't have the camera. And this guy, you go in the street, and thousands of people walk through him and don't even pay attention. The guy selling, is happy, is coming every day to the work, breathing all the dust of the train every day, and sells sweet for the people. The only intensity in the subway. That's the all interesting in that painting. And all the color, very poppy, and all the stuff. And he was so happy that we photographed him. We've been in Chinatown, people throwing us tomato and so on that didn't want us to photograph. And he was so happy that we photographed. And that got the biggest reaction I ever got on painting.
And I'm putting up a couple other from the New
Yeah.
York story. But
Yes.
tell us briefly what happened to you. So you're from Israel, but you moved to New York over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And you told me when I was writing the essay for the book, you had to start over. I mean, what was
Yes,
what was it like?
I have to say that it's like schizophrenic, you know. It's like schizophrenia because I was in Israel, very well-known artist, and I had a show when I was 25 years old already in Tel Aviv Museum, and all the collectors in Israel bought my work, and I was lucky, and I came to here. And I told you, I was more like an abstract. I could not paint any portrait. They didn't teach us. I came here, and it was like revolution for me. I went to the Met, I went to the Prado, I went to all the world, and I started to realize, I said, listen, I have to change. I could not call to myself artist if I'm not going to paint figure, if I don't learn. I had to teach myself by myself. And I had a studio in Long Island City, and I remember that was the first moment that I paint realistic. I went and I discovered one room. It was near PS1, the Museum of Modern Art, the new. And I saw a window that looking in another window and looking in another window. And I was looking on an art book and painting, copying Velázquez, copying all these artists. And I said to myself, listen, look at this beautiful pigeon coming in the morning, in the evening, in the night, and they sitting on the wind, and it's a whole life. I said to myself, listen, I took a canvas. I didn't realize. I forgot all the painting. I took one canvas, and for 1 year I painted that canvas from reality. And Dov Gottesman, biggest collector in that time, that has a room in the Tate Museum, and said, Yigal, I want to commission you to do this serial of realism and that was the beginning. And then I realized I could not sit here, like Louis said, and paint from life for 1 year. I didn't do anything. People come to the studio, I didn't do any painting. So I said to myself, you know what, I'll take the camera. I didn't know how to photograph. And I start to photograph and start to see the pigeon coming in the night and then in the day. And you know what? When I was a kid, my grandfather used to have a pigeon in his home. And I remember like a kid when he took the pigeon and put on my chest, and I was so scared with all. And I remember, you know, a lot of time they said about artists that instead they go into psychology, they paint. They paint their fear, they paint their craziness, they paint all what they want to be, and they don't know what to do. So that's what's happened. It helped me to get the fear over the pigeon because I could not come to any close to pigeon, and then I paint, and then I become a realistic painter.
Awesome. We're glad you did. You know, there's so much more to be seen, and I know you're all very excited now that you have seen these slides, which don't do anything justice to see the works in person. We've also prepared a reception for you in the lobby, but I know you'll want to make a beeline to the exhibition.
I just want to
Oh, yes.
add a little bit to the end here,
Oh,
because
sure,
I
sure.
didn't finish, because we're talking about photorealism in the digital age. And Yigal is the only one painting people in the digital age. We have a lot of landscape painters and a couple of still life, but what's important with the digital age is that when an artist used to paint a model, sometimes she was a little bit shy, there was nervousness when they were photographing, but with the digital camera, he can start walking and talking in the forest, and you're going to see some Bear Mountain pictures with two girls. In the beginning, there's a little bit of self-consciousness, but after an hour, you're just walking and talking, but that camera going, and he's taking 3,000 pictures. And you can take as many as you want. Then you can go to the computer, and you can take parts of the 30 that you selected out of the 3,000 and say, well, I like this part for her dress better, and you can create an image in the computer. So the digital age, there are probably a dozen artists now, and they are painting finer, more detailed, more information-laden paintings that have ever existed on the face of the earth anywhere in human history. And that's what the digital age photorealists are about, and he is one of these 10 leading artists in the entire world. In my career, I find 5 a decade if I'm lucky. So since the digital age began, maybe I found 10. Anyway.
I
Go
just want to thank to everybody that came tonight, and I want you to enjoy it. I want to thank to my girlfriend Jennifer that I brought my child. You believe me, I'm 62 and I have 2 years old now, besides Sheer and Adam, my 2 children. And the third children is here. And if you bother you, just tell me. And Wayne Yates and Eileen Kaminsky and Tracy and John Enrath, and especially to Louis and Susan Meisel. If will not be here, well, this show will not exist. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And there's going to be a book signing at 7:30, so please
Yes.
see him
So
there.
welcome to the
Okay.
show, everybody.